Hello and welcome to the SciFirst MovieTalk episode. So in this episode, I'm discussing the 2023 action film sequel, John Wick Chapter 4. The fourth movie in the overall John Wick franchise, and as directed once again by Stahelski. Once again, it's time to get suited and booted for another chapter in the John Wick saga, which all started with its title character, John Wick, as played by Keanu Reeves, an ex-professional hitman cum assassin, setting off on a mission of vengeance, but one which quickly became about his freedom and escape from the life he had tried so hard to avoid, becoming embroiled in a never-ending cycle of chases, fights, and death, with nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, as the underworld's governing body, the High Table, looked to remove him from the picture forevermore. In his ambition for freedom, Wick trains his sights on the High Table themselves, cutting them right at the top, and this has not gone unnoticed. In their fear, they give one of their most ruthless tyrants, a senior member of the High Table, the Marquis, as played by Skarsgård, to use every means necessary to bring John to his knees. So then follows absolute chaos as the Marquis pursues Wick and those that have helped him in the past, or simply those that have failed to put an end to Wick, determined to prove a point that nobody and nothing is ever higher than the table. So, unlike the first three films in the series, although this chapter follows from the events of the last, it doesn't do so directly. Not instantly. It does actually follow directly when you think about it, but it doesn't follow instantly into the next moment, shall we say. The time period between the last film and the first isn't specified, only that we have moved forward enough in time such that John has recovered from the injuries he sustained at the end of the last, different to that between the first, second and third, which all took place within a couple of weeks of each other, with each literally following on from the minute the last ended. Not that that is really of any great importance. However, it is interesting to kind of note that that jump in time has happened as compared to the previous entries. But I think when all's said and done, that actually fits in better now with the time that's kind of passing between each film's release. It feels more like a natural progression for the characters and more for the escalation that, of trouble that Wick kind of causing this universe, And dare I say it, the age of Reeves himself. Now, don't get me wrong, I am not in any way putting a slant on this. I can only hope that when I'm pushing 60, to have even a fraction, and I mean a fraction, of the energy and scope he has once again kind of brings to Wick as a character. It is totally exemplary, and literally has no bounds in this respect. My hat's off to him indeed. Forming the fourth entry in Wick's overall story to date, this one, throughout it all, has a distinct feeling that everything's been kind of leading to this. It feels like a finale. I know there are plans to kind of expand this universe, but in this at least, it feels like the journey Wick started all of those weeks ago may now be finally coming around full circle. This movie does feel like accumulation of those efforts and the time that we've invested within the series to date, and it certainly does not disappoint in this respect. It has more than its fair share of exhilarating and brilliantly constructed fight sequences, as one would certainly expect from this franchise, nothing less, in some of the most amazing spaces yet. And indeed some clever cinematography that gives us a pretty decent game-style environment at times, that lets us kind of capture much of the action from as many different angles at the same time as humanly possible. It's a movie that, for me, brought together much of what we've kind of learned and witnessed in the previous entries into kind of a brilliant kind of opus, whilst also adding a new layer of its own in the form of the Marquis and the Harbinger, as played by Clancy Brown, who were brilliantly dark, unnerved, unexpected, and in the case of the Harbinger, wonderfully melancholy, and macabre, yet stern and abiding. adding a brilliant kind of tug-of-war between new school impetuousness and the old ways of the table. It's certainly a film that's kind of more than just a sum of its parts. It's ruthless once again. The fight sequences, well, they certainly don't disappoint, nor do they outstay their welcome, striking a perfect balance in this respect, and once again, wonderfully involved and personal, with a distinct drive and motivation. Kind of, John Wick is certainly back from the shadows. I do miss, however, the more kind of controlled, planned and systematic aspects of Wick that we had kind of had in the first two installments. The setup, the anticipation. What seems to kind of crept in within the last few installments is more of a kind of a haphazard style, where they choose to kind of keep on simply throwing bad guys his way, lining up for a quick dispatch. Now, I'm not saying that I enjoy them any less, but it is an aspect of Wick I feel we have kind of moved away from, that kind of helped set up this fear that the underworld had for him. And this kind of seems all but lost as we now head through this installment. It's all just random chaos to some extent, Hey. But we have come a long way with the character since first being introduced to him back in 2014. And it certainly works as a potential swan song for what, has been and is, and just such an epic story arc. And that's certainly what this installment gives us, a story. Much more of an involved plotline examining in focus the consequences of Wick's past actions, the bonds of friendship that have been forged, and how tenuous many of this, can be, while others remain strong and uncompromisable, even at the hands of the table. It weaves a very brilliantly dark and twisted web of intrigue, and probably one of the best in the series from that standpoint to date. It's not as emotionally as invested. I say this now since the first one, but it hasn't been as emotionally invested to Wick as the first one was. None have captured that. They haven't. But this time around, there's this emotional involvement and higher stakes for other characters at play instead, which, given their relationship to Wick, have a really poignant effect and certainly carry a timbrous tone of their own. Again, in context with the journey and the destination they and Wick have been basically inevitably been heading. My only real gripe is the movie's runtime. Now, I really don't mind a film being near to 3 hours, and even beyond. Go nuts. I am not bothered. Bring more popcorn, bring more hot dogs. I'm happy in my seat, I like to know that I've got my money's worth at the cinema. And there's no doubting you get that in bounds here. However, I found that it wasn't always as evenly paced as it could have been at times, and moments really did feel quite stretched. There could have easily have been 20 or so minutes kind of cut from this, and it would have been a much punchier film without really taking anything away from the story. It would have flowed and felt so much more structured. However, sadly, I do have to admit that as it stands, it did feel very laboured in places. When it had its moments, it was on top form, totally on the edge of your seat action and flair, However, there were other times when you kind of slumped back, waiting for the next part of the story to kind of kick in. Kind of going in kind of fits and starts in this respect. But, to be honest, that really is a small price to pay. I mean, like I said, it gives you your money's worth. And if you've been following the series, I'm sure that you will find this truly satisfying, no end. It provides more of the same amazing cinematography, choreography, and truly remarkable moments that the series, has become synonymous for. And although it's perhaps not smoothly laid out as it could have been, it still remains a truly invested entry into the franchise that continues to show, in terms of quality, content, and overall delivery, just how amazingly consistent this series has actually been. Showing some amazing commitment from both the cast and the crew involved, being a real testament to just how involved and expansive and, they wanted the world of John Wick to be. Quite the cinematic experience. Overall, yet again, what we have here is another example of an action movie at its finest that delivers deeper, or delves deeper, it does deliver, but it delves deeper into the murky underworld of its titular anti-hero, John Wick, who is now cemented here once and for all as one of the genre's most iconic, gritty and unshakable characters. It might not be paced all that incredibly well. I don't think it makes the best use of its runtime, but it still feels like an event to behold. It has that air of grandeur about it still, that just kind of feels like it brings everything we've experienced and learnt about this universe and the character of John Wick into full focus. Like I've said, this time around, it's more than just the sum of its parts. It's the accumulation of the plight Wick has incurred since his very first outing, and forms a brilliant swan song for the character, and indeed for many that we have come to love throughout the series. Yet again, the fight scenes are exemplary and take place in some amazing locations, especially as we take a whistle-stop tour around Paris, with assailants coming from all sides. It can certainly be a relentless episode, and decently graphic when it wants to be. And while I don't think it does much more for John Wick as a character than what we've kind of already come to learn, is always a man of many words, I think it kind of rounds everything off with a sense of style, swagger and substance, decorum, with a brilliant nuance and sentiment to the way we kind of came in. So, that brings me to the end of this episode. Many thanks for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please do leave a like. Please do hit that subscribe button for more movie reviews, show reactions and other movie-related content. Absolutely loved having you at SciFirst MovieTalk. Definitely love to have you back. Most of all, just thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.